and say hello. You're on For the People. Who's this?
Well, golly, Keith, it's Michael Croce. How are you?
Michael Croce. Now, that's a voice for radio for sure.
Somewhere. Yes, as a former People's Radio Network talk show host, former Sun Radio Network talk show host. How old were you then? Like 9?
I was definitely a young one in diapers.
I remember, this will tell you about technology, sitting in your father's office at the Sun Radio Network, where he had, the man was a genius, he took TRS computers, Radio Shack TRS computers, networked them together, and built a radio network infrastructure with TRS Radio Shack computers that had no memory, nothing. He put this whole thing together. But I remember sitting in his office one day when he had gotten a fax machine, and I'm sitting there staring at the fax machine, and I'm saying, honestly, somebody can take a piece of paper and write something on it and stick it in their fax machine, and it's going to come out there? He said, if you sit here long enough, something like that is actually going to happen. I'm waiting for a fax right now. I said, really? And he goes, yes. He said, but you are irritating me, so could you get the hell out of my office? And I said, not until the damn fax comes.
You remember that. And I don't, that was, when I was a kid, but he did amazing things. Like, you remember my dad.
I knew your dad and your mom quite well. I was there in the very beginning of the People's Radio Network. Jack Ellery was the program director. He's the one who offered me the job. He heard me filling in for Stan DeFreitas on his gardening show and called Stan DeFreitas to get my number, and Stan wouldn't give it to him. So he called the station manager at old WPLP, and they gave him my number. He called me up and said, you want to do a national, gardening show? And I said, gee, why not? And he said, well, come on over and talk to me, and you have to meet the boss. And the boss was your dad. And your dad, looked up at me like, you know how to do a gardening show? I said, yeah, I know how to do a gardening show. And he says, okay, you're on. Just like that, boom, and then Ellery takes me out by the pool and says, listen, people are now listening to this saying the pool, but a long story. The show was, the original Sun Radio Network was done out of Chuck's old house on Hillsborough Avenue. There was a swimming pool, and behind it was a garage.
Yeah.
Your dad constructed the garage into a studio. And by the way, the entire network was run on car batteries that were under the floor.
Wow. Now, that I did not know. That's...
Yes.
Crazy.
There was a charger of some kind that went in and charged all those batteries. But all of those batteries were put in place so that if the electricity went out, the network would keep running. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, so we're in here doing a talk show on top of a bunch of lead batteries that could explode at any second. And your dad said, yes, that's true. Would you like a donut? I said, sure, thanks. and off we went. It was rather amazing. But now, getting back to you, and by the way, your dad and your mom were both the coolest people in the world. And I will tell you, you're sitting here saying you need to figure out how to make the network run.
Yeah.
And how to keep the show going. Let me tell you how your dad did it.
Please.
Oh, okay, because I was there through the whole thing. Your dad and Chuck got together, and they put together a bunch of products. They created, out of thin ice or thin air, a bunch of products. They created a credit repair product that I used to repair my credit back then, and it worked.
Before Dave Ramsey.
Oh, long before Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey didn't exist. They put together, and they put this together in a book that they published. They self-published on a web offset press, so it came out, as newsprint in an 8.5 by 11 format, and they sold it for, I don't know, $20 plus $3 shipping, and it cost them about 50 cents to create and about another 50 cents to ship. but that little book in itself brought in a ton of of things. Then he created just a lot of products like that.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Ellery created a diet book that they self-published that sold thousands. I mean, tens of thousands of his diet books. Chuck came up with a how to survive if you don't have money, how to rebuild your life kind of publication that they came out with. And as a matter of fact, I had that until about 5 years ago. That sold like crazy. And then he came up with the idea of selling memberships to, what happened after that is Chuck got greedy. I love Chuck a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Sold the network to the Nazis.
Yeah.
He didn't know he was selling the network
he
to
didn't
the
know.
Nazis.
Yeah.
But he sold the network to the Nazis. The Nazis' first order of business was to dump Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, the Nazis loved me. And I did not like the Nazis. Willis Carto, who was the one who financed that, people who were listening.
Now that's
to
tongue-in-cheek, just so anybody doesn't get offended. You're using that tongue-in-cheek, that term Nazis.
Nazi?
Right.
No, he was a Nazi.
He really was.
Tongue-in-cheek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was a Nazi.
You're being serious.
He hated Jews. He thought people...
Are you there? I think I lost, unfortunately. Are you there? Yeah, I'll have to have Michael give me a call back. 813-423-8255 if you'd like to give me a ring back. He's referring to the United Auto Workers, and I have mentioned this many times before that Hillary Clinton did write a letter when I was at the network demanding Chuck to be off the air immediately, and it did happen soon after. Let's go ahead and put Michael back on. Michael, are you there?
Yes. Did you hang up on me?
No, we just gremlin in the system. I guess we didn't charge those batteries under the floor.
Under the floor. Anyway, yes, Willis Carto was a Nazi. He liked me. The guy that was the president of the company that they put out liked me. The reason that they liked me is both of them were very avid gardeners, and both of them kept hitting me up for gardening advice constantly. So they liked me, but they dumped Chuck. Chuck then went and rebuilt the People's Radio Network out of up off the coast in that little town, Cedar Key. And immediately it took off, and Chuck did the same thing again. Now, by this time, your dad was gone, and, your dad and mom were selling QMI. By the way, Chuck also sold QMI on the network and made gazillions of dollars selling QMI.
I remember that.
Yes, and your parents actually sold QMI after they left the network.
Neat.
Pardon?
That's pretty neat.
It is. Your dad had an attitude of, don't ever tell me I can't do something. I will always figure out a way to make it work, which is why I so liked your dad. I don't think, your dad put up with me, but I so liked your father. I think he liked me. We got along. But I always felt as though he puts up with me. And he would just look at me sometimes and throw his arms up in the air and walk away. But he was so cool. He was just so cool, and I learned so much from him. But they used that same formula in Cedar Key. But the important thing that they did at Cedar Key is they sold memberships for the people. And you just didn't get a membership. Now, I noticed when Chuck came back this time, he tried to sell memberships, but he didn't give anybody anything for it.
Yeah.
And the memberships for the people came with a couple of books, and it came with a quarterly newspaper.
Something special.
And he stayed in touch with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you, when they moved over to the Telford Hotel, they had a building across the street where they had a phone center.
Oh, yeah.
And for the people, memberships sold like crazy.
Yeah, they did.
And it was and it wasn't expensive, but it was a very worthwhile investment because you got, sometimes he would come up with something and do a special mailing to people, and people loved it. I don't know if you ever were at the Telford.
Oh, yeah, I
The
worked
show
there.
was going.
Yeah, I ended up working there in 95,
Oh, okay.
96, 97, 98.
Yeah, you know how people would come into the lobby of the Telford Hotel to watch Chuck do the show.
From the lobby, that's right.
He had the studio in the lobby with bulletproof glass, and people that weren't supposed to know that it was bulletproof glass, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I exposed it on the air by mistake.
It's okay.
Chuck's wife would get so annoyed with me also. You know, everybody in authority at either Sun Radio Network or People's Radio Network always got annoyed with me, but we always stuck together. And, it was hysterical. But again, they had that building across the street, and they made a ton of money. And then, once again, I don't know why he did it. He never explained it. He sold out to the UAW.
Yeah, from what I understand, Michael, on that deal was that he was a 501c3 nonprofit organization, People's Network, Inc., and he got some letters from the IRS, apparently, saying that because he was too political on his radio show and he couldn't remain that way, or were they going to pull his status?
Mm-hmm. Well, there were two entities there. There was the nonprofit entity, and then there was the for-profit entity.
Mm-hmm.
The for-profit entity owned the hotel, the restaurant, the bar, the gift shop, all of that stuff, and the radio network. The nonprofit entity was a nonprofit entity that did everything. Chuck sold his for-profit business to the UAW and got a goodly amount of money for it. And what did the UAW do? Same thing the Nazis did. They promptly got rid of him. I mean, just overnight got rid of him.
Yeah, and Chuck was like number 2, number 3, just really very amazingly popular, as you know. I mean,
at that time, when they got rid of him, he was on the top of his game. He was on hundreds and hundreds of radio stations across the country.
And television.
And television.
Newspaper.
People were wandering, and he had that newspaper that he published that he also made money with. And people were coming in there like crazy. Now, he did have some things, and as much as I love Chuck, and I love Chuck dearly, he did do some weird things.
Never. Not Chuck.
No, Chuck did some weird things.
All right. Well, what did he do?
Here's the weird thing that Chuck did. In 1999, you were working there then,
mm-hmm.
Most of his shows were about the millennium coming up and how everything was not
you don't even have to say
anymore.
anymore. Yeah, that really cooked things pretty badly. The Y2K deal. It wasn't good.
He had a warehouse in Tampa with about 15 employees shipping out stuff, and I was at that warehouse many times, and shipping out stuff all across the country that people were buying from him to make sure that that everything listed. He's selling generators.
Doug Peralt with Acorn, his new company that he formed, in Ruskin.
Right.
I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was selling all of those things. And then when 2000 came, and by the way, I bought a brand new computer program for my business because I was positive my DOS program that I'd been running it on up until then was going to die. I love that DOS program. So I bought a $2,500 Windows program to take over, my business at that time. And, the 2000 came, my computer still worked, everything still worked,
mm-hmm.
and people started sending stuff back to get money back. And the Acorn just all of a sudden disappeared. It was just gone.
Yeah, that was a weird happening. There was a fallout, another one of sorts, with Doug Peralt, the CPA.
Yes.
The IRS put an audit out on Chuck for 18 years. 18 whole years. And Doug Peralt almost lost his job being a CPA. They audited him personally. And
mm-hmm.
and then Acorn. And after that, Chuck really just started losing stations. Then he started having a lot of health issues.
Well, then he had that accident. Eventually went on to have that accident. But the Acorn thing was not Chuck's finest hour.
No, I agree.
I'm just going to